Founded here in 1839, Longwood University has been here for more than 150 years. And in those 150 years, dreadful things have happened. Things that have left us in the possession of some ghosts. Here to tell us these ghost stories is Dr. Jim Jordan, Professor of Anthropology.
You're right, James. I think you're right. I was not here that 5th day of March in 1839 when Longwood began as the Farmville Female Seminary. But in my racket as an archaeologist, sometimes I feel like I was here that day. And there have been a number of strange things that in the brief time I've been here since 1978 have happened to me on this campus at your alma mater. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on the Longwood show and to have a chance to recount a few of these bizarre adventures that I've heard about and in a couple of really scary instances actually seen. One of them has to do, and I know that you're intimately familiar with this story because it's come down on High Street for decades and decades now, has to do with the terrible incident of the blanket. Well, the long and short of it was that a poor girl came to the Longwood Female Seminary shortly after the Civil War was over. And she got here and she discovered that she was poor. She'd never known that before. But when she got to the seminary and realized that many other girls had clothing far superior to hers and, had items of material culture. We're talking about beads and bangles and all kinds of things that were important. The iPod hadn't come along yet in 1865, but beads and bangles had. And she recognized that some of the girls at the seminary, they had been given by their big sisters curios, heirlooms left over from the Civil War. And gosh, she wanted some of these kinds of things, but she had no contacts here at the seminary because she was a poor girl who was here on scholarship. It wasn't like her mother had gone here or her sister or her cousin. She checked into the dormitory, and that first night she began looking around, noticing the clothing and the books and the pens and so on that other girls had, and she was starting to feel pretty bad about herself and her relative poverty. Well, it got even worse because when the hall meeting was over and it was time to go to bed, the poor girl went back to her room, and she realized that everyone else had brought along these fantastic quilts. And at her home, she had slept on linsey woolsey, real rough kind of blankets and so on. And to tell you the truth, she didn't have one of those along with her. Well, to tell you the truth, the long and short of it is she went in the dang closet and searched around and found a blanket. And she took that blanket out, Civil War artifact or not, and that was going to be her blanket. And she thought no one had seen her. In the middle of the night, she woke up, and it was uncomfortable in her room. It was hot. She kicked that blanket off and snuffed the candle out and went back to sleep. A couple of hours later, about 2 a.m., she woke up again. The dagnam blanket was up over her head, and that was why it was so hot. She was suffocating inside the blanket. Boy, this really made her angry, and she did something. I wish she hadn't done it. I wish I'd been there that night, and I could have warned her not to do it, maybe, although I wouldn't have known. She threw that blanket on the floor. She tramped on that blanket, and she blasphemed that blanket. She swore at it. For what happened next, no one knows for sure, but in the morning, when they came in, something had happened. And as near as we can guess, it was this. She fell asleep for one last time, and that blanket somehow got off the floor. It covered her up completely. However the blanket did her in, it must have been very agonizing and slow, for the next morning, when they finally got her out of the blanket, they discovered that her fingernails, which were worn long in those days, in the 1860s and 1870s, had been forced through the palm of her hand, and her fingernails had come out the back of her hand. In her agonies, she had impaled her own palms with her fingernails and driven them through out the back of her hand. One can only imagine what must have been happening to her inside the blanket. You really shouldn't steal blankets. You know what I mean? You should, who knows? Maybe she just thought of herself as borrowing them. But you shouldn't even borrow blankets. And in fact, probably, anytime you pick up like a t-shirt or a sock or something like that, you should make damn sure it has your name in it. Well, to tell you the truth, when you go to bed tonight, it might look like your blanket, but I'd double check it. You know what I mean? Look underneath the blanket, make sure it's got the same stain marks on your blanket always does. Tomorrow morning when you get up, check your underwear. Make sure it's really your underwear. You'll recognize your underwear and not some underwear that perhaps was lying about your room because, well, we don't want clothing consuming students anymore, and we don't want your fingernails to go through where those fingernails went through, if you know what I mean.
Ah! Sorry, that last segment was